At the army base, whispers began to spread. It started small, like smoke before a fire. A cook in the mess hall whispered it to a cleaner. The cleaner told a driver, who told a guard at the gate. Within a few hours, every corner of the base seemed to hum with the same shocking words. General Toby Ndlovu's wife, Amelie, was pregnant. It would have been a normal and happy thing, except for one truth that no one could ignore. General Toby had been away on duty for almost a year. He was far from home, serving at a border mission where no one could visit and no one could leave early. So how could his wife, living alone in the general's house, be expecting a baby now? Soldiers spoke in low voices. Some pretended not to care, but everyone was curious. The cooks stopped stirring the pots to listen. The drivers leaned on their trucks and shared their thoughts. Even the officers, who were supposed to be serious and quiet, exchanged uneasy glances. It was not just gossip anymore. It was something that touched the pride of the entire base. No one dared say the question aloud near the general's office, but the air carried it anyway. Who got the general's wife pregnant? Amelie, the wife of General Toby, had always been respected. She was kind to everyone, from the highest officer to the youngest guard. She helped the soldiers' wives when they were sick, brought food for the poor families near the gate, and even read stories to the children in the camp's small school. People loved her. She was gentle, polite, and warm. But now, when she walked outside her house, the air felt different. Conversations stopped when she passed. Smiles faded too quickly. Some people even turned away, pretending to fix something or look busy. Amelie noticed it all. She felt the silence like cold wind on her skin. Still, she kept her head high and tried to smile. Inside her heart, fear grew heavier each day. She knew what everyone was thinking, and it hurt. Her maid, Lindy, tried to comfort her. "Madam, don't mind them," she said softly while cleaning the table. "People talk because they have nothing better to do." Amelie gave a weak smile. "Maybe," she said quietly, "but it is different this time." She knew her husband would hear about it soon, if he hadn't already. The base had its ways. News always reached the general, even if whispered behind closed doors. And when that day came, she didn't know what she would say. At night, Amelie sat alone on the veranda, her hands resting on her growing belly. The crickets sang in the grass, and the air was cool. She thought of Toby, his strong voice, his steady eyes, his letters full of love and discipline. He had wanted a child for so long. She had wanted the same. But fate had been cruel. Years passed, and nothing happened. Doctors had said it might never happen at all. She remembered their last conversation before he left for duty. He had taken her hands and said, "Amelie, when I return, maybe we will have our miracle." She had smiled then, hiding her tears. She didn't know that miracle would come in a way no one would understand. Meanwhile, the soldiers at the base grew restless. Some said the doctor had something to do with it. Others claimed a close family friend was visiting too often. There was even a rumor that a stranger from town had been seen leaving the house late one evening. None of it was true, but gossip needed no proof. It only needed ears to listen and tongues to repeat. Sergeant Paco, one of Toby's oldest men, tried to stop the talk. "You all should be ashamed," he told a group of younger soldiers near the gate. "The general has fought for this country more than anyone. His wife deserves respect." But one of them laughed. "Respect," he said. "Then she should respect herself too. A year is a long time, Sergeant." Paco glared at him, his fists tight, but he said nothing. Deep down, he too wondered if there was more to the story. Days passed. The rumor refused to die. It grew like a tree with new branches, every person adding their own story. Some said Amelie was hiding something. Others said she cried alone at night, afraid of what would happen when the general returned. Even the officers' wives began to distance themselves. They stopped visiting her home. Invitations to tea or charity meetings suddenly disappeared. Amelie's phone was silent. One afternoon, while she was sitting in the garden, she heard voices by the fence. 2 soldiers were walking by, unaware she was near. "Did you hear?" one whispered. "The general might be coming back next week. He'll find out everything." The other soldier laughed nervously. "Then we'll see what happens. Maybe he'll..." Amelie stood up before he could finish. The soldiers froze when they saw her. She didn't speak, she only looked at them, her eyes filled with quiet sadness. Without a word, they saluted quickly and hurried away. That night, Amelie couldn't sleep. She walked around her empty house, touching the furniture, the pictures, the things that still smelled of her husband. Her heart was heavy. She wanted to explain, to tell the truth, but she didn't know if anyone would believe her. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the tired face of a woman carrying not just a child, but also the weight of judgment. In the small town outside the base, the story had already reached the market. Women whispered it while buying vegetables. Men shook their heads and said, "Even the mighty fall." Children repeated bits they heard from adults, not understanding what they meant. Amelie's only friend left was her old neighbor, Mama Thandi, a retired nurse who had known her since she married the general. One morning, Mama Thandi came to visit, bringing warm porridge. "My child," she said softly, holding Amelie's hand, "truth walks slowly, but it always reaches where it must go. Don't lose heart." Amelie nodded, tears in her eyes. "I hope so," she whispered. Far away, in a dusty military camp near the border, General Toby sat in his tent. A letter from home lay on his table, unopened. His aide had mentioned hearing strange talk from the base. Toby tried to ignore it, but the words stayed in his mind. He stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was Amelie's familiar handwriting, calm, neat, loving. She wrote about the garden, about the neighbors, about missing him. And then one line made his heart stop. "By the time you read this, my love, there will be a new life growing inside me. Our miracle has finally come." Toby dropped the letter on the table. His thoughts raced. His hands shook. He wanted to believe, but the dates did not make sense. Outside his tent, the night wind howled softly across the sand. A soldier called his name, but he did not answer. He sat still, the letter resting on his knees, staring into the dark. Back at the base, the rumors grew even louder. The soldiers were certain now that the general would soon return, and when he did, they expected a storm. Amelie stood by the window that night, the moon shining on her face. Her hands rested protectively over her belly. "Come home soon," she whispered to the wind. "And please, believe me." The night answered only with silence, and the base slept uneasily, waiting for the day when truth and judgment would finally meet. When Toby came home, the air around the base was heavy and strange. The soldiers lined up at the gate, their boots polished, their uniforms straight, but their eyes told another story. Some looked down when he passed. Others saluted too quickly and turned away. Even the wind seemed quiet, as if it knew something that Toby did not. The driver stopped in front of the big white house at the edge of the base. It was the same house he had left almost a year ago, but something about it felt different now. The flowers in the garden had grown tall and wild. The front door was open, and Amelie stood there, waiting. Her face lit up when she saw him. She tried to smile, but her eyes were full of worry. She walked toward him slowly, her hands trembling a little. "Welcome home," she said softly, her voice breaking. Toby looked at her for a long moment. He saw the changes, her fuller cheeks, the soft roundness of her belly beneath her dress, the way she avoided his eyes. 1,000 thoughts rushed through his mind, but his lips stayed closed. He did not ask questions. Not yet. He stepped inside the house, placing his bag near the door. Everything was neat and clean, just like Amelie always kept it. But it felt different now, too quiet, too careful. He could almost hear the walls whispering. Amelie brought him water and sat across from him. Her fingers twisted the edge of her dress as she watched him drink. The silence stretched between them like a rope ready to snap. "You must be tired," she said gently. "Your food is ready. I made your favorite, beef stew and rice." Toby nodded but didn't move. His eyes stayed on her. Finally, he said, "Amelie, when did you find out?" Her hands froze. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, "A few months ago." He leaned back, his face calm but his heart racing. "You didn't tell me." "I wanted to," she said quickly, tears rising in her eyes. "I wrote letters. I started them so many times but never sent them. I didn't know how. You were far away. I didn't want to distract you from your mission." Toby looked away, his jaw tightening. He had been on dangerous duty, yes. But this was something he should have known. Outside, a soldier passed by the window. Toby noticed how the man turned his head away quickly, pretending not to look. The same thing had happened at the gate, and on the road. Everywhere he went since he arrived, people had acted strangely. Something was wrong, and everyone knew it. That evening, Toby walked around the base. Soldiers greeted him stiffly, but their smiles were hollow. Conversations stopped when he came near. He asked simple questions about reports and training, but no one spoke freely. The usual laughter and noise were gone. As he turned the corner near the medical office, he saw Dr. Lwazi coming out of the building. The young doctor looked up, froze, and then quickly tried to walk the other way. "Dr. Lwazi," Toby called. His voice was firm but calm. The doctor stopped, turned slowly, and saluted. "General, sir. Welcome back." Toby studied his face. The man's eyes didn't stay still. They kept darting to the ground, to the side, anywhere but to him. His hands fidgeted with the papers he carried. "How have things been at the clinic?" Toby asked quietly. "Good, sir. Very good. We've been keeping busy." Toby stepped closer. "You visited my home often while I was away." The doctor swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. Madame Amelie wasn't feeling well sometimes. I was checking on her health." Toby's eyes narrowed slightly. "Her health?" "Yes, sir. She had some concerns. But nothing serious." "Is that so?" "Yes, sir." There was a long pause. Then Toby gave a short nod and said, "Good. I'm sure you did your duty." He walked away without another word, but his mind was full of questions. The doctor's unease wasn't just nervous respect. It was fear. That night, Toby sat alone in his study, staring at the walls. He had seen fear before, on the battlefield, in interrogations, even in the eyes of guilty men. He knew what it looked like. And Dr. Lwazi had looked afraid. Amelie entered the room quietly, carrying a cup of tea. "You haven't eaten," she said softly. "I'm not hungry." She placed the cup on the table. "I know what people are saying," she whispered. Toby looked up slowly. "They think terrible things about me," she continued. "About us. I hear them when I go to the market. I see how they look at me." "And what should I think, Amelie?" he asked gently, his voice calm but heavy. Her eyes filled with tears. "Think what you know in your heart," she said. "Not what they say." He said nothing. He only watched her as she stood there, her hands resting protectively on her belly. Later that night, after she went to bed, Toby went outside and walked through the garden. The moonlight touched the flowers she had planted before he left, red hibiscus, yellow marigolds, and white lilies. They had grown wild, just like the rumors. He remembered her letters, full of hope and longing. He remembered the way she used to talk about wanting a family. And he remembered how many times the doctors had told them it might never happen. Now, standing under the cold night sky, he didn't know whether to feel joy or fear. In the days that followed, Toby tried to return to normal duties, but everywhere he went, the silence followed him. Officers hesitated to speak freely. Even his most trusted men looked uneasy. The story was alive in every hallway, even if no one dared say it to his face. Once, during a morning briefing, he saw one of his captains glance toward him and then whisper something to another officer. Both men went quiet when Toby looked up. "Is there something you'd like to share?" he asked in a calm but cutting tone. The room fell silent. "No, sir," the captain said quickly. Toby dismissed the meeting early. That afternoon, he visited the clinic again, this time unannounced. Dr. Lwazi looked startled to see him. "General," he said, almost dropping the files he was holding. Toby entered the small office and closed the door behind him. "Relax, doctor," he said softly. "I'm not here for trouble. I just want to understand." "Understand what, sir?" "You've been my wife's doctor. You know her condition better than anyone. Tell me truthfully, is she well?" "Yes, sir," Lwazi said, but his voice trembled. "She's healthy. Very healthy." Toby leaned on the desk, his eyes steady. "Then why do you look so frightened, Doctor?" There was no answer. Only the sound of the ceiling fan turning slowly above them. Toby straightened up. "If there is something I should know, I expect you to tell me soon. For everyone's sake." He left the room quietly, leaving the doctor pale and shaking. That evening, Amelie tried to act normal, but she could feel the distance between them. They ate in silence. Every small sound, the clink of a spoon, the ticking of the clock, felt too loud. When Toby finally spoke, his voice was calm. "I have seen battlefields, Amelie. I have seen fear and lies and truth mixed together. But I have never faced something like this." She looked at him, her eyes red. "You don't believe me," she whispered. "I want to," he said. "More than anything." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Then believe your heart," she said softly. "Because I am not your enemy." He looked at her, and for a moment, he saw the same woman who had waited for him through long nights and lonely months. The woman who had stood beside him through every storm. The sun was setting behind the army base when Toby decided he could not wait any longer. The golden light spilled across the yard, but the beauty of the evening did not touch him. His heart was full of questions, and he needed answers now. For days, he had watched the doctor, seen the man avoid him, seen the fear in his eyes. It was time to know the truth. He walked toward the clinic quietly, his boots crunching against the gravel. The guards saluted him, but he barely noticed. His mind was already inside that small building, where the man who held the truth was working. Dr. Loisy was in his office, sitting at his desk, trying to write something. But his hands shook so much that the pen slipped and fell to the floor. He was thinking about the general again, the look in Toby's eyes when they had met last time. Eyes that saw through everything. Eyes that didn't miss lies. When the door opened suddenly, Dr. Loisy jumped up. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Toby standing there, tall and silent. "General," he said quickly, "you should have sent for me. I would have come to you." Toby stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "No, Doctor. This is something I must hear face to face." Loisy's throat went dry. He gestured toward the chair, but Toby remained standing. His voice was calm but firm when he spoke. "You know why I'm here?" The doctor nodded weakly. "Yes, sir." "Then start talking," Toby said softly. "Tell me everything, and tell me the truth." Loisy took a deep breath. His mind raced, searching for the right words. For weeks he had kept the secret, believing it was not his place to tell. But now, faced with a man whose honor was being destroyed by rumors, he knew silence was no longer right. He lowered his head and began. "General, I never meant to hide anything from you. What people are saying, it's not true. Madame Amelie has done nothing wrong." Toby's eyes narrowed slightly. "Go on." "The pregnancy," Loisy said slowly, "it came from a medical procedure. A fertility treatment." Toby's breath caught. "A fertility treatment?" "Yes, sir," the doctor said quickly. "Before you left for duty, Madame Amelie came to see me. You both had tried for years, and she was losing hope. You might remember, sir, that we discussed the possibility of preserving your genetic sample in case you were away or something happened." Toby frowned, trying to remember. The memory came back faintly, a conversation months before deployment, when the doctors had mentioned it as an option. He had brushed it off at the time, saying, "We will try again when I return." He had never thought Amelie would go through with it alone. Loisy continued, his voice trembling but clear. "She came back a few months later, sir. She said she had thought about it for a long time. She wanted to surprise you. She said she didn't want to tell you until she was sure it worked, until she had good news to share." Toby's jaw tightened. "And you agreed to do it?" "I followed procedure, sir," the doctor said quickly. "Everything was done legally, properly. We used your stored sample, just like you authorized months before you left. She signed the forms. I signed them too. There was nothing wrong or illegal about it." The room was quiet for a long moment. The sound of the ceiling fan was the only thing moving. Toby turned away, his hand on the back of the chair. His voice dropped lower. "Why didn't you tell me the moment I returned? You let me walk around this base while everyone whispered behind my back." Loisie's eyes filled with guilt. "I was afraid, sir. Afraid of breaking her trust. Madame Amélie begged me not to say anything until she was ready. She wanted to tell you herself. But when I saw the rumors growing, I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe she had told you already." Toby turned slowly to face him. "You thought wrong." The doctor looked down. "I know, sir. I'm sorry." For a long time, Toby said nothing. He walked to the window, staring outside. The sun was gone now, and the sky was turning dark. The lights of the base flickered on one by one. Soldiers were walking past, their shadows long on the ground. All this time, he had been angry, hurt, and confused. But now the truth stood before him, simple, quiet, and almost unbelievable. His wife had not betrayed him. She had believed in their dreams so deeply that she had gone through the process alone. She had carried not someone else's child, but his own. Still, the ache in his chest did not disappear easily. He turned back to Loisie. "You realize what this has done to her? To me? To our name?" "Yes, sir," the doctor said quickly. "And I take full responsibility for my silence. If you want to report me, I'll accept whatever punishment you give." Toby stared at him for a moment, then said in a quiet voice, "I don't want to punish you, doctor. I just wanted the truth." He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused and said, "No one else needs to know the details. The rumors stop here." "Understood." "Yes, sir," Loisie said, relief flooding his face. "Thank you, sir." When Toby stepped out into the night, the cool air hid his face. He walked slowly back home, his mind full of mixed emotions, anger, sadness, relief, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time, peace trying to find its way back. The lights from his house glowed softly through the windows. He could see Amélie sitting by the table, her hands folded, her head bowed as if in prayer. He stood there for a while, watching her quietly. All the pain of the past days washed over him, the rumors, the doubt, the silence between them. Now he understood it all. He opened the door slowly. Amélie looked up, startled. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Toby," she whispered, "where have you been? You didn't eat." He walked closer, his steps calm. "I was at the clinic." Her face went pale. "The clinic?" "Yes," he said softly. "With Dr. Loisie." She froze, her lips parting but no words coming out. "I know everything now," Toby said. Tears filled her eyes instantly. "Toby, I wanted to tell you," she whispered. "I was just waiting for the right time. I didn't want to bring it up until I was sure it would work. I wanted to give you good news, not false hope." He nodded slowly. "You went through all that alone." Amélie wiped her eyes. "I didn't want to worry you while you were in danger. I just wanted to do something that made you happy. You always said you wanted a child before time ran out. I wanted that too." He sat down beside her, his face softening. "You could have told me, Amélie." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I was afraid you would think it was foolish, or that I was rushing. But when the doctors said there was still a chance, I couldn't wait any longer." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house was quiet, the night calm. Then Toby reached out and took her hand. "You should have trusted that I would understand," he said gently. "But I see now why you did it." Amélie looked at him, searching his face for anger. Instead, she saw only tired eyes, and love hidden beneath them. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered. "You never did," he said quietly. "But the world almost made me believe you did." She leaned against him, her tears falling silently. He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. Outside, the moon rose high above the quiet base. Somewhere, a radio played a soft song. The next morning, the army base woke up to a silence that felt different from the ones before. It was not the heavy silence of fear or gossip, but the quiet that comes before something big is about to happen. Soldiers moved carefully, whispering to each other, wondering what the day would bring. Everyone knew that General Toby had spoken to the doctor the night before. They also knew that whatever he learned would change everything. By noon, a message was sent across the base. Every officer, every soldier, every worker, all were to gather in the main courtyard. No one knew what the general planned to say, but everyone came. Some stood with curiosity, some with guilt, and some with fear. The air was warm and dry, the sun high above them. General Toby stepped out from his office, tall and steady as ever. He was dressed in full uniform, his face calm but unreadable. Amelie watched from a distance near the house, her hands clasped together. She didn't know what he would say, but her heart prayed that he would not face them with anger. When Toby reached the center of the courtyard, the soldiers saluted. He looked around slowly, his eyes passing over each face. Men and women he had led for years, people who respected him, people who now stood ashamed. He waited for the noise to settle, then spoke in a clear, firm voice. "I have heard many things since I returned," he said. "Stories, whispers, lies mixed with curiosity. And for days, I have watched you all carry those words as if they were truth." No one moved. The air felt thick. Toby continued, his voice steady but heavy. "You all know my wife, Amelie. You know the kind of woman she is, gentle, kind, and strong. Yet, many of you were quick to judge her. You spoke of her as if she were a stranger, not the woman who helped your families and cared for your children. You let rumors lead you." A few soldiers looked down. Some shifted uncomfortably. Toby took a deep breath. "Let me tell you something. What you think you know is not always the truth. What you hear in whispers can destroy lives. And if you call yourself a soldier, then you must remember, our duty is not only to protect our country, but also to protect each other's honor." The courtyard was silent. A bird chirped in the tree nearby, the only sound breaking the stillness. Toby looked toward the small group standing near the clinic, where Dr. Loisy stood nervously among the officers. The general motioned for him to come forward. The doctor hesitated, then stepped out, walking slowly toward the front. Everyone's eyes followed him. "This man," Toby said, "has carried the truth that many of you tried to twist." He was silent out of respect, but his silence gave birth to lies. Loisy lowered his head. "I'm sorry, sir." Toby nodded. "Apology accepted. Now speak, doctor. Tell them what you told me." The doctor's hands shook as he took a deep breath. "Madame Amelie's pregnancy," he began, "is not what people think. It did not come from sin or betrayal. It came from a fertility treatment, one done using the general's own preserved sample. Everything was official and legal. She did it with hope, not shame." Gasps spread through the crowd. A few men exchanged looks of disbelief. The rumors that had burned through the base like fire suddenly turned to smoke. Loisy continued, his voice trembling. "Madame Amelie went through it alone because she wanted to surprise the general. She didn't want to distract him while he was away in a dangerous place. She wanted to give him joy when he returned." When he finished speaking, the courtyard fell silent again. Even the wind seemed to stop. Toby looked over the faces of his soldiers, the same men who had whispered, the same women who had avoided Amelie. He could see regret in their eyes now, shame replacing suspicion. He turned back to the crowd and said, "Never judge a person before you know their story. Rumors are like bullets. Once fired, they cannot return. They wound deeply and silently. You are soldiers. You fight enemies outside these walls, but you let gossip become your enemy inside them." His voice grew softer but still strong. "You all know what my wife has done for this base. She cared for your families while I was gone. She prayed for your safety. And yet, you doubted her. You failed her. And you failed me." He looked toward Amelie, who stood quietly under the shade of the veranda. Their eyes met for a moment. She could see forgiveness in his face, and tears filled her eyes. Turning back to his men, Toby said, "Let this be a lesson. Respect must live even when truth is hidden. Honor must stay even when doubt tries to break it." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he added, "From today, there will be no more talk of this matter. The doctor has spoken. The truth is clear. And anyone who continues to spread lies will answer to me directly." The soldiers straightened immediately. "Yes, General!" they shouted in unison, their voices echoing across the courtyard. Toby gave a single nod. "Good. Now get back to your duties. Serve with the same discipline you expect from others." The crowd slowly began to move, the soldiers dispersing quietly. Some stopped to apologize to Amelie as they passed her house. Others bowed their heads, too ashamed to meet her eyes. For the first time in weeks, the base felt peaceful. The tension that had hung like a dark cloud began to lift. Dr. Loisy stayed behind, still standing near Toby. "Thank you, sir," he said softly. "You didn't have to protect me." Toby looked at him. "You told the truth. That's all that matters now." The doctor nodded, relief washing over him. "I won't forget this, General." "Just remember it," Toby said simply. "Next time, speak sooner. Silence can be as cruel as lies." When everyone had gone, Toby walked back to his house. The afternoon sun was fading, and the golden light returned. Amelie was waiting at the door. When he reached her, she smiled faintly, tears still on her cheeks. "I heard you," she whispered. "I heard everything." He smiled a little. "You were supposed to stay inside." "I couldn't," she said softly. "I needed to know what you would say." He looked at her with gentle eyes. "I said what was right." She stepped closer, her hand resting on his arm. "They will still talk," she whispered. "Let them," he said. "Words can't hurt us anymore." For a moment, they stood there in silence. The sound of children playing in the distance reached them, laughter returning to the base for the first time in a long while. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the hills, a new kind of peace filled the air. Soldiers came by with small gifts for Amelie, fruits, flowers, letters of apology. She accepted each one with grace. At dinner, Toby sat quietly across from her, his expression calm. "The truth always wins," he said softly. "Sometimes it just takes longer to arrive." Amelie smiled, her eyes full of light. "You saved me today." He shook his head. "No," he said gently. "You saved yourself, by holding on to the truth." Later that night, as they sat together under the stars, the camp was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet, not filled with fear or gossip, but with respect. The truth had spread faster than the rumors, and it left behind something stronger, trust. Amelie leaned her head on Toby's shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, feeling the soft rhythm of her breathing. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "will be a better day." She nodded. "Yes," she whispered. The rains had come early that year. The land around the army base looked fresh and green, and the sound of thunder rolled softly in the distance. The soldiers said the rains were a good sign, a blessing after all the trouble that had happened. Life at the camp had slowly returned to normal. The air was lighter, the laughter of children returned, and even the birds seemed to sing louder in the mornings. Amelie sat on the small veranda of their home, watching the raindrops fall. Her hands rested gently on her growing belly. The baby was almost due. Every day, she felt the tiny kicks stronger than before, and each one filled her heart with both excitement and fear. She had waited for this moment for so long, a child, a family, a chance to see her husband smile again without pain behind his eyes. Inside the house, Toby sat at his desk, going through reports. But every few minutes, his eyes lifted to watch Amelie through the window. She looked peaceful, glowing with new life. It made him forget all the dark days, all the doubts, and all the whispers. He no longer cared what anyone thought. What mattered now was the quiet joy of knowing the truth, of knowing this child was his, theirs, and born from love, not from shame. As weeks passed, the base prepared for the birth as if it were a national event. Soldiers built a small shelter outside the house so that no one would disturb the family. The wives of officers brought gifts and food. Even the young soldiers, who once gossiped, took turns guarding the house with pride. Everyone wanted to make things right. One late afternoon, while the sky glowed orange, Amelie felt the first pain. It came softly at first, then stronger. She called out, and Toby rushed to her side. "It's time," she whispered, her voice trembling. He felt his chest tighten. For a moment, the brave general who faced battles without fear now felt helpless. He sent for Dr. Loisy immediately. The doctor arrived with his bag, calm and ready. The other women in the camp helped too, bringing water, towels, and warm blankets. The house filled with quiet movement and low voices. Outside, soldiers waited anxiously, pacing back and forth. Hours passed. The rain started again, soft and steady, as if the sky was blessing the world below. Toby stood outside the room, listening to Amelie's cries, his fists clenched and heart pounding. He wanted to go in, to hold her hand, but the doctor told him to wait. So he waited, for hours that felt like days. Finally, as midnight neared, the door opened. Dr. Loisy stepped out, his face shining with sweat and joy. "General," he said softly, "you have a son." For a moment, Toby just stood there, frozen. Then he took a deep breath and felt tears rise in his eyes. "A son," he whispered, as if testing the words. He walked into the room slowly. Amelie lay on the bed, weak but smiling. In her arms, wrapped in a white cloth, was a small baby, tiny, quiet, but full of life. She looked up at Toby and said, "Meet Thando." Toby knelt beside her, staring at the child. The baby opened his eyes, dark and calm, and looked at him. The general reached out, his rough hand trembling as he touched his son's soft cheek. "Thando," he said again, his voice breaking. "Love. That's what you are." Amelie smiled through her tears. "Yes," she whispered, "because love fought the hardest battle, and won." The baby made a small sound, like a sigh, and Toby laughed softly. It was a sound no one had heard from him in a long time, pure, unguarded joy. Outside, word spread quickly. The soldiers cheered quietly, some clapping, others smiling at each other. One said, "The general has a boy." Another added, "He named him Thando, love." They repeated the name as if it carried magic. In the following days, the base was full of warmth. People visited, bringing gifts and prayers. Amelie stayed mostly indoors, resting, while Toby watched over both her and the baby. Every night, he would sit beside the cradle and watch Thando sleep. The small boy's breathing was soft, steady, a reminder of peace after the storm. Sometimes, Toby would tell the boy stories in a low voice, stories of courage, truth, and honor. "When you grow up," he would whisper, "remember this, strength means nothing without kindness, and truth is worth more than power." Amelie would smile from her bed, listening. "He will be like you," she would say. "No," Toby would reply gently. "He will be better." Weeks turned into months. Thando grew quickly, his laughter filling the small house. He had his mother's smile and his father's quiet eyes. Every time he laughed, it reminded everyone how far they had come, from rumor to truth, from pain to peace. One sunny morning, Toby carried Thando out to the courtyard. The soldiers stopped to salute, but he waved them off. "Today, I'm just a father," he said, smiling. They laughed, seeing a softer side of their strong leader. He sat under a tree, holding the baby close, letting the sunlight touch the boy's face. "You see this place, my son," he said softly. "This is where people once spoke in whispers. Now, it's where they speak with respect. That's what truth does. It cleans the air." Amelie joined him a few minutes later, sitting beside him with a calm smile. "You've changed, Toby," she said playfully. He nodded. "Maybe," he said. "But peace changes everyone. You just have to survive the storm to feel it." They sat quietly for a while, watching the soldiers train in the distance. Birds flew across the sky, and children played near the edge of the field. The world looked whole again. That evening, as the sun set in gold and red, the camp gathered for a small celebration. There was singing, laughter, and the sound of drums. The people danced not just for the birth of Thando, but for the return of unity. During the gathering, one of the young soldiers approached Toby shyly. "Sir," he said, "I was one of those who believed the rumors. I was wrong. I am sorry." Toby looked at him kindly. "You have learned," he said. "That is enough. Let this lesson stay with you. Truth will always walk slower than lies, but it always reaches the finish line." The young man nodded, moved by the words. Later that night, when the celebration ended, Toby and Amelie sat together again, holding their baby. The stars were bright above them, and the camp was quiet. Amelie looked down at Thando sleeping peacefully and said, "He will never know the pain we went through." Toby smiled faintly. "No," he said. "But one day he will know the story. Not as gossip, but as truth. And maybe it will teach him what love can survive." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We made it," she whispered. "Yes," he said softly. "We did." For a while, they said nothing more. The night wind was cool, carrying the smell of rain and earth. Somewhere far away, a night bird called. Inside the house, the candlelight flickered, making soft shadows on the walls. Toby looked at his wife and son again, the two lives that gave him purpose. He thought of everything they had faced, the rumors, the anger, the silence, and finally, the truth. And he realized something deep in his heart. Love was not weak. Love had been the strongest weapon of all. He kissed Amelie's forehead and whispered, "Sleep. Tomorrow is a new day." She smiled softly, closing her eyes. Thando stirred a little but soon settled again, his small hand resting on his mother's chest. Toby looked out the window one last time before the candle went out. The moon was bright, and the sky was clear. The storm had passed, not just the one outside, but the one inside their lives.